Donald Trump hates mail-in ballots. He wants to get rid of them because they're responsible for massive voter fraud. The whole thing's a scam, one big hoax.
Mail-in ballots are corrupt. You can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots.
It's worth pointing out, when Donald Trump lost the 2020 election to Joe Biden, more Americans than ever voted by mail. That's nearly 70 million Americans in 2020 who voted by the method Trump is now trying to destroy. And if he's successful by signing an executive order to that effect, it would completely overhaul what has been a mainstay of American elections since the Civil War.
If the president were and Congress were to eliminate mail-in balloting, this would be just about the first time in American history that the national government has acted to try to restrict voting rights.
So why do it? Does Trump have a point? And if he does, what can he actually do about it?
We, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots.
Part of Trump's argument that mail-in voting is bad is that no other country does it.
You know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses it because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place.
So I find it hard to believe Trump only suspects he might be wrong about this, because he is very wrong about this.
Well, there are many other countries, of course, that use mail-in voting, Canada being one of them. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands of people in our country used mail-in voting last time to cast a ballot in the federal election campaign.
And it's not just Canada. More than 30 countries around the world allow at least some voting by mail. Trump is right that most don't, but many of Europe's biggest democracies do, and have for decades. The UK, France, Germany, Spain, Austria, Switzerland, Greece. And by all accounts, these are all successful democracies without compromised elections and widespread voter fraud. So where's the scam?
It's infinitesimally small. States like Oregon and Washington, for example, which have been using mail-in voting for many, many years, almost exclusively, the incidences of proven voter fraud are so astronomically small.
Astronomically small, as in, over a 20-year period, according to one law and policy think tank citing the New York Times, Oregon, the pioneer in this area, has sent out more than 100 million mail-in ballots since 2000 and has documented only about a dozen cases of proven fraud.
When it does happen, it is more likely to happen with mail-in ballots because the ballots are outside the purview of election officials, but it's still very rare there too. It tends to be easy to catch.
And this is a really important point, acknowledging that there are sometimes problems with mail-in voting, but without overblowing or mischaracterizing them altogether. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic election, Trump tweets this: "Just out, some people in the great state of North Carolina have been sent 2 ballots. Rigged election in waiting." He's referring to a real thing there. There was a mix-up in North Carolina that year ahead of Election Day, but Trump leaves out 2 important details. One, that fewer than 500 voters were affected. So that's 0.009% of votes, which is still maybe 0.009% too many. But the other important fact is that according to North Carolina's election director, each mailing label includes an individual code making it impossible to vote twice. The electronic system simply doesn't allow 2 ballots from the same person to be accepted or counted. Once the first ballot goes in, the voter's record would reflect that and block the second. And anyway, Trump ended up winning North Carolina in 2020. But what we all got instead from Trump ahead of the result, rigged election in waiting.
One report that looked at the 2020 election in particular dug into some of the details in the 6 battleground states and found about 475 cases of fraud out of tens of millions of votes that were cast in that election. So there is absolutely incidents of fraud. It is something that happens, but it's not something that is very common at all.
So look, there's no sense in me going through every single instance of Trump casting unsubstantiated aspersions on mail-in voting.
Now, mail ballots, they cheat, okay? People cheat. Mail ballots are a very dangerous thing for this country because they're cheaters.
Because much of the time he launches an attack on voting by mail, it's without evidence. So I don't know what to do with it. But when the FBI director was asked.
My question is very direct. Is voting by mail secure?
His answer was ultimately about as direct.
We have not seen historically any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election, whether it's by mail or otherwise.
When what Trump says doesn't align with evidence or fact, it's hard to know whether he's mistaken or lying, or he knows something the rest of us don't. Like, where is he getting his information from? Well, here's what he recently told Fox News.
You know, Vladimir Putin said something, one of the most interesting things. He said, your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting. He said mail-in voting every election. He said no country has mail-in voting. It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections.
Now, I have no way of knowing whether Putin actually said this, or why Trump takes election advice from the authoritarian leader of a country which every impartial international observer says hasn't had a free, open, or fair election in decades.
And he said, and you lost it because of mail-in voting. It was a rigged election.
And therefore, a lot of his arguments about fraud are simply based upon really sort of personal grudges or personal disagreements with mail-in voting.
We vote after, early. Nobody knows what the hell we're doing. The elections are so screwed up. We have to get back in and we have to change it all. We want to go to paper ballots. We want to go to same-day voting. We want to go to citizenship papers, and we want to go to voter ID. It's very simple. We want to get rid of mail-in voting.
If we set aside Trump's insistence that mail-in voting is rife with fraud, because
there has never been any evidence to support the president's claims that there is widespread fraud associated with this voting method,
one might ask, well, what other reason would a person in his position have to eliminate an entire method of voting?
It could be a grudge that he wants to get rid of it because he genuinely believes it helps Democrats.
If you look back over the last 30 years of voting in the United States, there's a very clear trend line. In-person voting becoming less popular and mail-in voting becoming more popular. Right now, it's about a third of all voters who vote by mail. And watch how people who mail in their ballots tend to vote. Historically, not that big a split, but the pandemic election in 2020, a seismic shift in how Democrats versus Republicans voted. That difference shrank in 2024, but it's possible this only reinforces Trump's belief that the surge in mail-in voting hurt him in 2020, that maybe the decrease in mail-in voting helped him in 2024.
And I think he's trying to A, delegitimize the system, or B, look for a way to try to gain electoral advantage in 2026 when Republicans are expected to face a tough race to keep the United States House of Representatives.
Now, there's no guarantee things actually pan out that way.
We know that of the 8 states in the District of Columbia where mail-in voting is all that they do, there are some Republican states among them.
Yeah, here's the breakdown by state. Those parts of the US which rely most heavily on mail to cast votes. Some, where almost all voting is by mail, like Washington and Oregon, lean heavily Democrat. But others, like Montana, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada, they voted for Donald Trump in 2024. So things are starting to get really confusing now, right? Very little of this makes clean, complete sense because it's not clear what Trump's motivation really is, or whether what he's calling for actually helps him. So one more possibility, that chaos is the point.
One of the things that Trump is very good at is controlling the media agenda and controlling the message. So all of this could be just disinformation or ways of trying to get the public to pay attention to something else and not pay attention to perhaps more pressing issues.
The thing I try to keep in mind when considering the great many things Trump says is that there's rarely just one dimension to any of it. He may or may not believe the US is the only country to allow people to vote by mail. He may or may not believe it was his downfall in 2020. And who knows why exactly he wants to see mail-in ballots disappear. Does he really think they're mostly fraudulent or helpful to Democrats? Or maybe just a distraction from any number of issues that dip in and out of the broader American political conversation? But let me just finish with this, that the legal experts we spoke to say Trump is pushing very hard against a line that the Constitution itself forbids any president from crossing.
Donald Trump has no power to eliminate mail-in ballots. He doesn't get to issue a royal edict. He's not the king of America. Congress has the power to alter state rules when it comes to congressional elections. That's in Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, but nothing is given to the U.S. president to do anything in relation to running elections.
Yes, running elections has always been the business of states. That's a foundational principle of the founding of America. If Trump tries to change that by executive order, by decree, he wouldn't just be banning mail-in ballots. He'd be tearing at the very core of a particular balance of power and testing the limits of the Constitution itself.